Welcome everyone, I'm Donna Kastner and this is Retirepreneur. You know, if you're a newcomer to this program, Retirepreneur, our mission is to help pre-retirees, those age 50-ish and older, make a smooth and successful leap from full-time job to part-time freelance gig doing work they enjoy. That's our mission, and this show is one way that we accomplish it. Now a quick look at today's program. In a bit, we'll chat with Barb VanBlarcum, Director of Programming at Hudson Community TV. We're going to learn more about video opportunities both locally and professionally. But first, the Retirepreneur News Roundup and a quick scan of the headlines. Retirepreneur News Flash number 1, and it comes to us from the Milken Institute. The headline, Aging Populations, a Blessing for Business. You know, with the shrinking workforce, many businesses are now taking a closer look at the silver workforce. This article has so many great statistics and highlights. Here are just a few. By 2030, Americans 60 and older will account for 25% of the population. That same age 60 plus segment, they're expected to account for at least 40% of U.S. consumption growth between 2015 and 2030. And yes, with unemployment rates running at record lows, the age 60 plus segment is a talent pool to power businesses. Now keep in mind, today's older adults, they're disrupting retirement norms. They're more interested in lifelong work and volunteerism. And get this, research shows that when older people are actively engaged in the workplace and in civic endeavors, things improve across the board. A recent BMW experiment showed that productivity improves when work teams are intergenerational. Older workers actually serve as mentors, as role models for younger colleagues. Remember that movie, The Intern, with Robert De Niro? Yup, it's happening over and over again in today's world. But wait, there's one more gem in this article about mindset. Another study found that those who held positive views about their own aging process lived, on average, 7.5 years longer than those with less positive outlooks. Which makes for a perfect segue to our next headline. Newsflash number 2 comes to us from 60andMe, and it's actually a column I wrote. I'm a guest columnist, and this 60andMe blog has over 500,000 readers, so yes, content marketing works. This first post, 3 remarkable gifts that help you flourish in your 60s. So it was the beginning of the year. I wrote this article truly embracing 3 gifts that I had been noticing more. One was this whole concept of greater happiness and the happiness surge, the U-shaped curve of happiness, that people early in life and late in life tend to be happier. The second gift was more moxie. I was bolder, I was more decisive, I was less interested in what others might think. You know, as Kelly Clarkson might say, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And number 3, I had a deeper sense of purpose. I really understood my unique why. You know, God graces us with gifts, and certainly 6 decades on this planet, you get a better sense of what you do well and what you don't do well. So anyway, I wrote this post, and I got a whole lot of feedback, positive and some negative. Some people read this and thought it was overly simplistic, too optimistic and positive, and it really made me pause. But happily, within this content thread from readers, there was another link that they shared that really helped to enlighten me, which takes me to newsflash number 3, which comes to us from the Washington Post. The headline, a Harvard psychologist explains why forcing positive thinking won't make you happy. It was a fascinating interview that I read in this article with Susan David. She's a PhD psychologist at Harvard Medical School, and she's also author of Emotional Agility, Get Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thriving in Work and Life. You know, Dr. David, in this interview, she warns us that today's culture tips heavily in favor of happiness and positivity, and this could actually be having a negative impact, making us less resilient. Dr. David goes on to say, Emotions like sadness, guilt, grief, and anger are beacons for our values. We don't get angry about stuff we don't care about. We don't feel sad or guilty about stuff we don't care about. And if we push these emotions away, we're choosing not to learn about ourselves. We're choosing to ignore our values and what's important to us. So yes, this Washington Post article actually enlightened me, and it prompted me to write a second post for 60andMe, the downside of relentless positivity. Make no mistake, I will always tip in favor of positivity and hopefulness, but when it gets to the point of relentless positivity, that might be a point where we recalibrate. And with that, we'll take a short break, but stick around because when we come back, Barb VanBlarcum at HCTV will join us. And we're back, and joining us now is Barb VanBlarcum, Director of Programming here at HCTV. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you for having me, Donna.
Well, and we've talked about this for a while because you and Dan have been masterful coaches for me. But before we start going down that path, I want to look at your background. And, you know, the internet being what it is, did some super sleuthing. And on LinkedIn, I discovered that you earned your bachelor's degree in semiotics at Brown University. And truth be told, I actually had to look up semiotics. And can you explain more about what that field is and what prompted you to pursue it?
Okay. Well, I started at Kent State in graphic design and illustration, and I had a job actually at Channel 45-49, so that's where I got my television start, was doing character generation graphics for programs. And then decided to try transferring and got into Brown, and I was happy to go so I could also take classes at Rhode Island School of Design. And I found this department there that was actually, at the time, it was a popular program, one of the few offered in the country, and it was bigger than their English department at the time in terms of student enrollment. And so semiotics is, it sort of deconstructs meaning. So it looks at the context of meaning, how things are dependent on their context, and also the person interpreting the sign or symbol. So it really deconstructs looking at how meaning is formed. So it's kind of across the board an academic, good liberal arts degree of many disciplines using it, linguistics, modern culture, film, English, writing, you know, everything that's created in a context has its dependence. So that's, to me it was, and what was so good about it too also was when I took my graphics classes at RISD, they were teaching it through semiotic theory. So it just worked out really well. And
wow.
The department was pretty fascinating with graduates of Ira Glass and Jeff Eugenides.
This American Life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're at Brown, you know.
Yeah.
So we're kind of flip-flopping here. I'm a New York girl that came out
Okay.
here,
All right.
and you're a Hudson girl that went back to Rhode Island, and then ultimately, you know, the whole East Coast, New York City.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that must have been quite an adventure.
Yeah, it was. And I moved to New York after graduating. But then was called back to Hudson. My mother had some health issues, and then my father passed on. So I stayed in the area, re-met my husband that I had met at Kent State. And we took a trip around well, I got my master's at Kent State in instructional design and educational technology. And then we took a trip around the country after I worked for a while. He worked for a while in Aurora. And we looked at all these different communities we had heard about, read about, and came back to Hudson after about 8 months of being on the road. And I don't know, there was a depth to Hudson that I would not find anyplace else in the world.
Agreed.
Because it's a personal story to me. So.
But it's nice to get out there and look and explore, and then
It
you
is.
end up, Dorothy, there's no place like home, huh? So to 22 years at HCTV, that's so impressive, and now you're Director of Programming. Can you tell us a little more about your role here at HCTV?
Okay, I guess I started here on the advisory committee because back when Hudson was deciding whether to start its own station or not, they formed an advisory committee, City Council did. And Jane Watterson at the time, who was on council, was spearheading this study, and asked me, because I had video background, to be on the committee. So we looked at the opportunities of that and decided to give our opinion to council that yes, I think Hudson's ready to start this with the amount of money that we have for the budget available. We could do this on our own. So I've been here since.
Well, and can we talk a little bit about the funding piece behind it? I'm going to kind of jump into that for a minute, because I'm curious. I mean, our paths crossed. I'm in Rotary, and it was kind of serendipity, and then I'm like, whoa, check out this studio. Talk to us a little bit about the funding model for HCTV.
Well, since cable came to American reality and landscape, you know, they use the right-of-ways to run their cable, and so we're required to give back 5% of their profits to the communities they serve, which is essentially across America. So like many communities, Hudson decided to put that money towards television. Some cities decide to use it for their roads or something else. But so it's actually our budget is based on those fees coming from Spectrum Now television.
And that sort of helps for me as an outsider coming in. I mean, it helped me kind of acclimate. You know, I would watch HCTV. I'd see some of the sports going on, the community ventures. I'd watch city council meetings. I mean, I think it's just another part of the Hudson dynamic. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I consider the station a community service. It's funded by the community, and it's open to the community, and it informs the community. It shares the community. So to me, it's a very unique department. It's housed here in Hudson High School, but we are city employees. And but our audience is the whole community, and now beyond, because we're streamed and also video on demand online.
So you've got so much going on here. Let me just ask, as far as programming. So there are certain, you know, standard elements of council meetings and school board meetings and sports and what have you. And then there are other programs. Talk to us a little bit about the programs that are the long-running programs, the new ones that are popping up. Talk to us about the schedule.
Well, we've had some very dedicated producers over the years, and I mean, when we pulled out of Cable 9 in Macedonia with the 8 other communities, First Congregational was taping its church service then, and they still are. So they're our longest public access. But also the half-hour show has been very popular. They've produced I think over about 120 episodes of that.
Wow.
And the Ultimate Game Challenge has been on for a long time. But Frank Youngworth's Good Day in Hudson has been a monthly program for, I think, 18 years. And then recently, I mean, we have various public access programs, and right now with yours, it brings in its own audience. I mean, everyone's got their kind of own viewer. And then we produce a lot of programs and tape a lot of events in town.
And certainly, so our paths crossed by Rotary, and I will say that, so our club meetings are airing every week, and it's such a great way to actually, again, the community doesn't understand what some of these organizations do, and this is just another way to help inform and enlighten. Well,
Rotary's been quite an active producer every week. I think Frank Youngworth and I went and met with Regis Smith, who was then president of Rotary, and that probably was in 1998. So Rotary has been on every week since then, and we have a huge archive of the meetings, but it's it's a representation of true community programming. You bring in your own local speakers, and they're of interest to the whole community.
Yeah, our speaker group, I mean, I'm a little biased, but the people that handle and recruit the speakers do a magnificent job. So it was Rotary that our paths crossed,
Yes.
serendipity. Suddenly I was involved in some email exchange around a particular program, and then you and I kind of went a few relays back and forth, and I'm like, you mean I can do a show here? And I have to tell you, Barb, so at the time, so you have this starry-eyed entrepreneur that comes bopping in, looking around, saying, wow. I was already kind of quoting video and starting to think about, I knew I needed to produce more video. And when I realized that this was possible in my own backyard and at, certainly a much more affordable cost, I couldn't resist. So talk to me. Am I typical? Am I crazy that I come in here? Or are you starting to hear from entrepreneurs? I mean, how do you determine whether you say yes or no?
Well, it's open to anyone who lives or works in Hudson, and they can produce a program like this one where the cameras are set up in the studio, someone's in the control room switching between cameras, and then you essentially can walk out in a week after the titles are put on and have a program that you can use on your own site. It's been used by political, during campaigns also, to put on websites for that. And it is something that if you use the equipment or use the studio, it has to air on HCTV, and that's the main requirement.
And when it airs is at your discretion, and you're just balancing a schedule and with the viewer in mind. What I like is that it is airing fairly regularly, enough that people have mentioned seeing it. So yay, local cable.
All right.
And then the other thing is that then I get a video file that I can edit and repurpose that content in a myriad of ways. So some of the interviews we've been doing, people don't have, online sometimes they won't watch more than a couple of minutes, so we try to break these into excerpts.
Yeah.
And that's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, Tom Speaks has also been producing his Appreciology program.
And Tom was my first guest,
Okay,
and I remember him.
that's right.
Yeah, I remember him saying, "Wow, this is possible."
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear he's doing a show
Still
too.
is, yes.
Excellent, excellent. There's another piece that you're impacting the community, and it's here at the school. So this studio is here at Hudson High School, and there's a broadcast journalism class.
Yeah, digital video production 2, and we have 4 students this year, and it's something that's just started again this spring semester. So we're talking about what's going to be happening next year, but. So the students, it's mostly based in field production, getting them out of their green screen studio and trying to give them examples of other ways that video are used in the community. So they've gone on remote shoots with us, have taped at the Peg's Gallery and made a PSA of their own out of that footage, and come here in the studio and stand behind cameras in the control room too to help produce some of the programs that happen here.
So it's the technical aspect, but it's also the content development. Are they exposed to that as well?
Yeah, and also the editing, production afterward, post-production, but also I think interfacing with the community more with their video too is a big part of it.
And I might add, one of your students, Ethan, thank you. You do an awesome job.
He's great.
I tap his wonderful talent to finalize this show. So technology, it's like this moving target, and it has to be hard, in this field to stay up to speed. How do live streaming wasn't possible.
And that's what really took us over into it just expanded us so much more, because before we were just limited to the households in Hudson that receive cable. We're a channel on everyone's cable package, basic to very high level channel usage. But after we went high def and went into streaming the video, then it's really available to anyone anywhere in the world to both stream the channel but also to look at our site and see past productions.
Do you have an opportunity to get a sense for who's looking? Is that kind of the Google, is there a Google Analytics piece to this?
There's more to that with Facebook Live, but there is some on the video demand sites. We can tell how many people have viewed which programs. It's
very interesting.
Nice because we didn't get the numbers. We know how many houses in Hudson have cable, but we didn't know who was watching and what shows were being watched. So now
Well, and the
it's-
archive streams gives you the on-demand. We're an
Yeah.
on-demand world, so sometimes we're not going to stop at 8 o'clock and watch a program. Now we can tap it when we want to.
yeah, much more convenient.
Okay. So let's just say, you and Dan, hello Dan, thank you for all that you do. You two have been outstanding teachers for me, because I'm not a broadcast background, and so you
Well, you
have been
come
helping
by it
me.
naturally, though. You seem very comfortable
You're
with
being
it.
very nice, but let's say that there are people out there that are like me, they're freelancers thinking, wow, I'd like to develop some video. What tips would you give them, or any advice on how they might explore this if they're here in Hudson?
Well, I think it's considering what video would do for what their intent, their mission is. And they are welcome to call us or email us for an appointment to come see the place, see what we offer in terms of equipment that they can check out to use at remote sites, and also our editing suites. They can see what's available and the training for editing if they're interested in that too. But it's developing a sense of purpose of what the program would be about, if they want to do a series or if they just want to do a one-time production about something, or interview someone they have in mind. We do a lot of oral history videotaping, so people have brought in their parent or an associate or someone they know represents a history of Hudson, or something they want to share with the community and also have documented in the archives.
So the one condition, truly, beyond the working or living in Hudson, is that it will air at some point on HGTV. So if I wanted to document our family's history, it would have to air.
It would have to air, yeah.
It might be 2 o'clock in the morning, but it'll have to air on HCTV. But it's really interesting. I have to think that there are people out there, certainly for this age demographic, there's a sense of purpose. And I think that the facilities and the support you're providing could help us find that purpose and advance it.
Yeah, and I always am hopeful that it'll be used as an artistic medium too, because it's got that capability, and it's not always about information, but it can be about poetry and beauty and things too, or even political opinion. I mean, it's got a wide breadth of possibilities, so it's really open to the community's interpretation of what you want to do with it.
Yeah, and they say within the next couple of years, 80% of content is going to be video.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, people are consuming it. Here's another interesting stat I found. I mean, if I Googled it, it must be right, correct? 85% of the video watched on Facebook is watched without the sound. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
So it makes me really think about the visual now,
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. Barb,
a good
you have
semiotic
been
study there.
Good semiotic study. There you go. Your
Okay.
next chapter is just
Maybe
beckoning
so.
you.
Okay.
Barb, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Donna.
doing this, but
Yeah.
also for the tremendous support you've given me as I
Our
launched
pleasure.
this.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, we have reached the finish line for this show. We hope you caught a few big ideas to explore, and we hope you'll join us next month when we share a few more. In the meantime, keep charging ahead with your own plan. Keep pushing ahead to create maybe your best career chapter yet, because you very well could be the next wildly successful retirepreneur.